"Don't you dare touch my son," I screamed, leaping over the ranch fence like I was back in training. One of the so-called HOA officers had his hand wrapped around my kid's arm, trying to drag him toward a black SUV parked near the edge of our ranch. My heart pounded. My vision blurred. My instincts took over. The man didn't know who he was dealing with. I tackled him from behind so hard we both hit the dirt, dust flying in all directions. My knee pressed into his spine, locking him down while my free hand yanked his fake badge off his belt. His partner, a heavy-set man with sunglasses and no real uniform, stepped back in shock, fumbling to reach for something under his shirt. I was faster. I pulled my sidearm and aimed. "Move a muscle and I'll make sure you regret stepping foot on this land," I growled. My son Tyler, just 8 years old, stood frozen a few feet away, his red hoodie covered in dust, his eyes wide with fear. Then sirens wailed in the distance, and that's when it hit me. This wasn't just a prank or a mix-up. Someone had sent these men, and they came prepared. They came for my child, but they weren't ready for me. Hi, I'm Jack Lawson. I'm a single dad, a trained military vet, and I run a ranch in northern Texas. I raise horses, train dogs, and teach my son how to ride, fix fences, and respect the land. But most of all, I teach him that no matter what, family comes first. You'd think that after retiring from service, moving to the countryside with your son would bring peace. But peace is a luxury when you have land others want. And sometimes danger doesn't come wearing a uniform. It wears a smile, carries a clipboard, and calls itself an HOA. But here's the thing. They picked the wrong ranch and the wrong rancher. Let me take you back to how it all started. It was a quiet Wednesday morning when the first sign of trouble showed up. I was fixing the irrigation pipe near the east paddock when a glossy white SUV pulled up to the front gate. Two women stepped out, both in crisp white polos with the letters HO printed on their chests. At first glance, it looked like a typo, but they said it stood for Hillview Association Operations. "We're doing standard checks for community compliance," one of them said, her voice sickly sweet. "We need access to the property." I frowned. "We're not part of any HOA, I told them. "This ranch has been in my family since 1894, and I'm not interested in joining anything." The second woman gave me a tight smile. "That's fine, we'll note that. Expect a formal letter." At the time, I didn't think much of it. You get all kinds of people out here. Land scouts, developers, nosy realtors, and now apparently fake HOAs. I dismissed it and went on with my day. A week later, the letters started coming. At first, they were just warnings. Violation of community landscape aesthetics. Unauthorized structures on shared boundary lines. Failure to respond may lead to fines. Shared with who? I own 67 acres, all legally outside any subdivision. I tossed the letters in a drawer. That should have been the end of it. But then they escalated. One morning I found a bright yellow sticker plastered on my barn door. Property in violation. Final notice. I peeled it off and burned it right there in a metal bucket. "Dad," Tyler asked me later that day, "are we in trouble?" "No," I told him. "They are. Let me tell you about my son. Tyler is tough, but he's gentle. The kind of kid who will scoop up a turtle from the dirt road and carry it to the pond just so it doesn't get run over. He loves feeding the horses, especially his favorite pony, Jellybean. And every Saturday we make waffles together and argue over which syrup is better, maple or blueberry. He lost his mom when he was 3. I lost my wife, and we've been figuring it out since then. Just the two of us, one day at a time. This ranch, it's not just our home, it's our safe place. So when strangers start showing up, claiming they have authority over that place, it's personal." The second time I saw them was during one of Tyler's riding lessons. I was showing him how to adjust the stirrups when I heard tires on gravel. 3 vehicles this time. 4 men stepped out. They didn't smile. They didn't knock. They didn't even say hello. They walked straight to the barn and started taking pictures. "Hey," I shouted, storming over, "get off my property." One of them flashed a badge. It looked fake, like something printed off a website. "We've received multiple complaints about livestock sanitation and potential child endangerment," the leader said flatly. I blinked. "What?" "The minor. We've been informed he may be living here under unsafe conditions." "Are you insane? I stepped between them and the barn door. Who told you that? What's your name? Who do you work for? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his back pocket and handed me a thin piece of paper. It was a cease and desist letter for parenting. I crumpled it in my fist and threw it at his chest. You've got 5 seconds to get off my land. He chuckled. We'll be back with law enforcement support. But that was a bluff. Real law enforcement doesn't roll up with mismatched polos and crooked badges. Still, they didn't give up. A few days passed. Tyler was quiet. He kept asking if they were going to take him away. I assured him no one would ever do that, not while I was breathing. I reported the incident to the sheriff, showed them the fake paperwork, the footage from my security cams. But without a name or company address, it was hard to trace. That's when I decided to prepare. I may be a rancher now, but old habits die hard. I reinforced my perimeter, added more security cameras, and trained my dogs for alert patterns. I even taught Tyler emergency call codes and defensive hiding spots in the main house. For a while, things seemed quiet until yesterday. It was around 4:30 p.m. Tyler had gone out to feed the chickens near the tool shed. I was inside fixing the old water heater. That's when I heard the dogs bark. 3 short bursts, then 1 long breach east side. I ran outside barefoot, no time to grab boots, and that's when I saw it. One of those fake HOA men had Tyler by the arm, dragging him backward while looking over his shoulder like he knew he didn't have long. There were no badges this time, no letters, just a black SUV with its engine running at an open back door. And that's when I charged. That's where you came in at the start of this chapter. Now the sirens are getting closer, but I don't know if they're real cops or another trick. I have this man pinned to the ground, my gun raised. Tyler is crying. My dogs are barking mad. And the second man, he just reached under his shirt. What's he pulling out? Viewers, what would you do in this moment? Tell me where you're watching from and stay with me, because what happens next will change everything. The second man's hand hovered beneath his shirt, his fingers twitching, eyes locked with mine. I could see the panic now, his confidence melting away the moment he realized I wasn't just a rancher. I was trained, precise, calm under pressure, and I had a weapon drawn without hesitation. Tyler whimpered behind me. My left arm shielded him while my right stayed steady, aiming directly at the fake HOA man's chest. Hands where I can see them, I said again, my voice low and steady like I'd practiced 1,000 times in combat scenarios. The man froze. Then slowly his hand came out. Empty but clenched. I didn't blink. Open your fist. He didn't. Sirens screeched louder now, closer. Dust clouds rolled down the ranch trail like a dust devil had been kicked up by the wind. 2 county sheriff vehicles skidded into view, tires screeching. Red and blue lights cut across the barn and fences, dancing off the sweat on the fake HOA guys' faces. My dogs stopped barking, but they didn't back down, trained to stay in guard mode until I gave the all clear. Deputy Ramos stepped out first. A good man. I'd known him since I moved here after discharge. Tall, always calm, the kind of officer who didn't jump to conclusions. Jack, he called, hand resting near his holster, but not pulling. You okay? I got 2 men who tried to snatch my son, I shouted back. One's detained, the other's holding something. The second deputy, Simmons, came around the side and immediately grabbed the second guy by the wrist. Let's see it, pal. The man struggled for a split second. Then the object dropped to the ground. A small black taser. Deputy Simmons gave a low whistle. Tried to take a kid with a weapon. Cuff both of them, Ramos said sharply. Right now. I finally let my breath go. My arms dropped slightly and I pulled Tyler close. He buried his face into my chest, shaking. Ramos approached as scanning the scene. You sure you're okay? I'm good, I said, still holding my son. But this is far from over. Turns out the men weren't with any real HOA. They were from a shell organization called Property Order Alliance, which had no legal standing in our county. They had been targeting rural properties near developing areas, pretending to be an enforcement group. Their tactic was intimidation, fake rules, phony fines, and now apparently attempting to declare unsafe conditions to threaten custody. I've never heard of anything like this. Simmons muttered as they loaded the two men into the back of the cruiser, trying to take a kid to scare someone into giving up land. That's mafia-level crazy. Ramos gave me a long look, Jack. Who did you tick off? That question kept ringing in my head all night. Who did I tick off? I stayed up late going through every old land letter, every odd mail notice. Nothing matched property order alliance. I knew this had to go deeper than just two random grifters. The next morning I got my answer. A white envelope was left at the front gate. No stamp, no return address, just my name typed. Inside was a single piece of paper. This is your last warning. Sell the ranch or lose everything. There was no signature, no phone number, just those words and a printed map. My land circled in red. I felt my blood run cold. This wasn't about an HOA. It was a land grab. Someone out there wanted my ranch bad enough to pretend to be law enforcement, send fake agents, and even attempt to take my son. But why? Tyler was quieter than usual. He sat on the porch with Jellybean, brushing her mane, his head down. You okay, bud? I asked, walking over. He nodded, then shook his head. Why do they want our ranch so bad? I crouched down beside him. Because it's special. Because it's ours. And maybe because they think they can scare us into giving it up. He looked at me, eyes still puffy. Are they going to come back? I paused. If they do, they won't be leaving the same way they came. That night, I took extra precautions. I booby-trapped the fence line, not with explosives or anything dangerous, but trip alarms, pressure pads, and warning flares. I trained my dogs on scent recognition using the clothes the intruders had worn. I installed motion sensors, cameras with night vision, and backup generators in case they cut power. I wasn't just defending my land. I was preparing for war. But nothing happened for days. It was quiet. Too quiet until the sheriff showed up again. Jack, Ramos said, stepping out of his cruiser. We got a problem. I crossed my arms. What now? He looked uneasy. Someone filed an emergency petition at the county courthouse. Says Tyler's living in dangerous conditions. That you're unstable. I froze. They submitted fake photos. Broken windows, dirty water, bruises on a kid that's not even Tyler. My jaw tightened. You've seen my place. You know that's garbage. I do, but it's not about truth. It's about court and stalling and making you look like the crazy one while they circle like vultures. I looked out at my fields, my land, my family's legacy. They weren't just trying to scare me now. They were trying to erase me. And then just before sunset, the drones came buzzing overhead, small, fast, circling the house. Two of them. One flew directly toward the stable. The horses spooked. The dogs barked. I ran inside, yanked the breaker to kill all inside lights, and pulled out my old military surveillance jammer. With a sharp beep, the drone's feed glitched midair. One of them crashed into the side of the barn. The other shot off into the woods. It had a camera. They were watching. They weren't done. And the next move might not be as subtle. Because later that night, under a sky full of stars, I found a red laser dot drifting across my living room wall, right toward Tyler's window. Do you see what's happening now? Do you see how far they're willing to go? Because the next part of the story is when I stop defending and I start fighting back. Where are you watching from? And what would you do if someone came for your child, your land, your life? Because this is just the beginning. The red laser dot hovered for only 2 seconds, but it was enough. I dropped flat to the floor and yelled, "Tyler, move." He didn't hesitate. He'd been trained. We'd practiced drills for tornadoes, wildfires, and after all this began, even intrusions. He rolled off the couch and crawled straight toward the hallway crawl space we designated as a safe zone. My heart thumped in my chest like a war drum. I rolled to the edge of the doorway and scanned outside through the shadows of the blinds. There, about 60 yards out, just beyond the tree line, a man camouflaged holding a scoped rifle. I grabbed my scope and confirmed it. Sniper posture, lying prone, watching my house, watching my son. That's when the reality sank in. This wasn't some property dispute anymore. This was an organized, deliberate attempt to terrorize us, and maybe even worse. I radioed Sheriff Ramos directly on the emergency band. Shots about to be fired. Armed surveillance on my property. Confirm position before I engage. Ramos didn't argue. Copy that. On my way. ETA 8 minutes. Don't wait if it's life or death. I didn't. I stepped out the back barefoot, armed with my long-range tranquilizer rifle, a non-lethal option I kept for predators like coyotes or panicked livestock. I moved fast but low, zigzagging through the barn and hay bales, keeping to the shadows. I had a clean line of sight. The man hadn't moved. He was too confident. I aimed, exhaled, and squeezed. The dart hit square in the thigh. He jerked, cursed, tried to stand, but the sedative kicked in quick. He stumbled sideways and collapsed into the brush. I moved in cautiously, weapon raised. When I reached him, I yanked off his balaclava. He wasn't a rancher. He wasn't local. His boots were new. No dirt under the nails, city hands. I found a fake ID, a burner phone, and most disturbing of all, a printed floor plan of my house marked with entrances, sleeping areas, and the word Target scrolled across Tyler's room. Ramos arrived shortly after with backup. They took the man into custody, but again, no real name, no background. The ID was registered to someone who'd been dead for 5 years. This is a hit team, Ramos said grimly, not random crooks. Someone is hiring professionals. That night I barely slept. I sat on the front porch with a rifle across my lap, watching the wind push through the grass, wondering how many more of them were out there. I had to make a move. The next day I visited my old friend Mark Collins, a retired Marine ex-intel guy who now ran a tactical gear store in town. He saw my face and didn't ask questions. He just nodded and handed me a satchel. You knew it might come to this. I hoped it wouldn't, I said. He leaned closer. They're going after your kid. No more warnings, Jack. No more waiting. You need to hit back. I nodded. Then I did something I never thought I'd do again. I activated a network of 5 men I served with. Old unit members, each one living quietly like me, until called upon. We met at the edge of my ranch that night. Each man wore a face hardened by service, hands scarred by duty. We weren't just soldiers. We were brothers. This isn't a battle for medals. I told them, this is for my boy and our land. We won't fire unless fired upon, but we will defend. They nodded. No questions. That same night, while we were checking perimeter lines, my dog Bandit growled and froze. Something was wrong. We moved fast. I followed Bandit through the field, through the dry brush, and into the small wooded corner of the ranch. That's when we saw it. A buried device, fresh dirt, a blinking red light. I dropped to my stomach, looked closely. A listening device, high grade, battery powered, with a small camera lens buried just under the surface. One of my men, Toby, cursed under his breath. They're bugging your ranch now. How long's it been here? I asked based on the power cell. Maybe 2 days. I turned to the group. They're watching us, probably listening now. I stared right into the blinking light and said clearly, you think I'm afraid? You think watching us will break us? I reached down, yanked the device out of the ground, and crushed it under my boot. The next day, I called an emergency press meeting in town square. I invited the sheriff, the mayor, and local reporters. I brought everything. The fake letters, the fake HOA badges, the drone footage, and most importantly, the floor plan marked Target. I'm here to warn every landowner within 50 miles, I said, standing on a hay bale with my son by my side. Someone is using fake HOA groups to pressure and threaten rural families into giving up their land. They tried to take my son. They planted devices. They sent armed strangers. But I will not back down. And neither should you. The sheriff backed me. The mayor launched an investigation. Suddenly, the county wasn't just watching. They were listening. But that very night, right when I thought we had the upper hand, the power to the ranch went out. Every light, every camera dead. I went outside with a flashlight. The generator had been smashed with a crowbar, and hanging on the barn door was a noose made from barbed wire with a note. You were warned. Next time we won't miss. So tell me, viewers, what would you do if this happened to your family? Let me know where you're watching from. Because the next part, I stopped reacting and I started setting the trap. The moment I saw that barbed wire noose hanging on my barn door, Something deep inside me snapped. Not fear, not anger. Focus. Laser-sharp military focus. They had cut my power, breached my ranch again, and left a threat for me and my son. After trying to snatch him, plant a sniper, and erase us from the land. No more warnings. No more waiting. It was time to bait the trap. I called the team to the living room. Me, Toby, Chris, Warren, and Eli. All ex-military, all seasoned, all loyal. They didn't need much briefing. We're setting up fake weakness. I told them we'll go dark for 3 days. No activity, no patrol, nothing on the cameras. Let them think they've scared us off, or we fled. Toby cracked a grin, while we dig the pit beneath their feet. Exactly, I said. We began reinforcing the barn and house from the inside. Hidden latches, pressure triggers at the gate, dummy wires rigged to sirens that would go off if touched. We placed decoy motion sensors in plain sight and hid the real ones under fence posts and beneath the gravel road. I even brought out a tool I hadn't touched in years, a secure field camera system used in recon. Undetectable infrared silent operation feeding directly into my encrypted tablet. 3 days later, just past midnight, they came. 2 black SUVs, same kind. This time they didn't knock. They marched up the dirt path, 6 of them. 2 carried duffel bags. 1 had bolt cutters. Another had a taser baton. They weren't here to talk. The lead guy, wearing night vision goggles, crept toward the barn while 2 others broke off toward the house. Chris and Eli were already in position on the roof, lying flat. No weapons raised yet, just watching. I whispered into my mic. Let them enter. Wait till the house breach. Inside, Tyler slept in the safe room, deep under the pantry floor. He didn't even hear a thing. Then they stepped onto the porch. That was their first mistake. Click. They triggered the dummy latch under the doormat. Screeching metal tore through the air as 2 floodlights blasted on. Sirens screamed. Dogs were released. Bandit led the charge, barking furiously, sending one of the attackers into a full-on sprint. He tripped on a tripwire we'd hidden beneath the deck stairs, and before he could stand, Warren tackled him from the side and zip-tied his wrists. Another one ran for the barn. Bad call. As soon as he opened the sliding doors, a homemade flare shot up from the roof, straight into the night sky, casting a red glow across the entire ranch. We were lit up like a battlefield, and now the neighbors could see. So could the sheriff's department. I stepped outside in full gear, spotlight behind me. You're trespassing on private property, I said loudly, voice amplified through the portable loudspeaker. You're under citizen's arrest. Surrender or face federal charges for attempted kidnapping and home invasion. The lead man turned, pulled something from his waistband, and froze. A red laser dot appeared on his chest. He looked up and saw Eli crouched above him, sniper trained and ready. Your move, Eli called. The man dropped his weapon. In less than 5 minutes, we had 4 of them zip-tied and face down in the gravel. 2 others had vanished into the woods, one bleeding from the leg after tripping on a buried thorn trap I'd set behind the water tanks. We called the sheriff again. When Ramos arrived and saw the scene, his eyes widened. This is the 3rd attack in 2 weeks, Jack. They're escalating. I know, I said, but this time, we're getting answers. We turned over the 4 intruders, and this time someone talked. A younger guy, no more than 30, cracked under pressure, said he didn't sign up for taking a kid, said it was supposed to be pressure work, not this. He confessed they were hired by a private security firm called Ridgecore Tactical Solutions, a group hired by land development interests. The goal? Pressure, harass, and if necessary, remove families who resisted land sales, especially ranchers. The company behind it, Praxis Land Development Incorporated. Swing, a massive corporation, billions in real estate known for shady methods in the past. Ridgecore handled enforcement, the man said. We were told it was legal, that you were in violation, that your kid was a pawn. I saw red a pawn. Ramos's fist clenched too. Jack, this changes everything. He got on the radio and called the feds. We spent the rest of that night gathering evidence. Every letter, every drone piece, every camera log. Ramos promised to fast-track it to Homeland Security and the FBI. It looked like the beginning of justice, but practice wasn't finished. 3 days later, a white van pulled up near Tyler's school. Luckily, he wasn't there that day. He'd been home helping me dig a new fence post, but the school security camera caught everything. A man in a suit stepped out, waited by the gate, and checked his watch. Inside the van, another man sat, arms crossed, staring at the building. When school staff approached, they drove off. No plates, no trace. They were still watching him, watching us. That night, Tyler sat across from me, holding his glass of milk with trembling hands. "Dad," he whispered, "will it ever stop?" I looked him in the eye. "It will, but not because we're hiding, because we're standing up." I put my hand on his, and then my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "This is your final warning. Leave, sell, or bury your son next to your cattle." This was no longer about land. It was about survival. And by the time the sun rose the next morning, I had made my choice. I was going on the offensive. They wanted war. They were about to learn what happens when you corner a trained military rancher. Viewers, where are you watching from? Because what comes next? You won't believe what I uncovered, and who was behind it all. By sunrise, I was no longer just a rancher. I was a soldier again, with a target, a strategy, and a purpose. The message threatening to bury my son was the final straw. I wasn't going to wait around for another ambush. They had crossed every line of decency and law, and now it was my turn to make the first move. I began with a phone call. "Mark," I said, reaching my old recon buddy again, "I need an in." "You sure about that?" he asked, voice low. "I've never been more sure," I replied. "I'm taking the fight to practice." Mark didn't hesitate. He gave me the name of a contact in Houston, a tech analyst who specialized in corporate investigations and digital forensics. Her name was Ellie Monroe, ex-CIA. Quiet, brilliant, and off the books. I drove down that same day, leaving the ranch in the hands of my trusted crew. Tyler stayed back, surrounded by 4 grown men who were tougher than nails and loved him like their own. Ellie's office was in the back of a bookstore, hidden behind a false shelf. Classic spy stuff. I liked her immediately. She didn't waste time. "You want to trace on practice?" she said, flipping open her laptop. "That means going through shell companies, dummy boards, and corporate firewalls." "I want names," I said. "Real names. I want to know who ordered the hit on my son." Her fingers danced across the keyboard like lightning. After an hour, she turned the screen to me. There it was, a flowchart connecting praise to multiple smaller property enforcement fronts. Ridgecore was just one of many. There were companies listed under fake environmental cleanup programs, eco-inspection firms, and false utility collectives. At the top, Leonard Maddox, CEO of PRAIS Land Development, multimillionaire, political donor, known publicly for revitalizing abandoned towns and creating new communities. Privately, he'd been tied to 5 different land seizure scandals, but no one ever stuck charges on him. Too powerful, too protected until now. I asked Ellie, "Can you prove he authorized Ridgecore to go after my ranch?" She smirked. "I already did." She opened a folder labeled Maddox Directive, Lawson Ranch. It contained emails, voice recordings, and transaction logs. Maddox had referred to my land as prime expansion territory and said, "If Lawson doesn't sell, make him hit where it hurts." Those were his exact words. "Copy everything," I told her. "Send it to the sheriff FBI and send me one private copy too." But Ellie wasn't finished. "You should see this," she said, clicking into a satellite scan. It showed my ranch from above. Clear overlays of the building's terrain and fencing. "Wait, this is military satellite grade," I said. She nodded. "Because Praise has contracts with federal subcontractors, and they're illegally using government access to map private lands." I felt the weight of it in my chest. They had government tech, private military, corporate funding, and they had targeted me, a single dad and a rancher. But now I had something stronger. Proof. I drove home that night, my truck humming under the stars. A USB drive full of classified secrets burning a hole in my coat pocket. When I pulled onto my land, my headlights caught something strange. The gate was open and no one was there. I drove in slow, my eyes scanning every angle. Then I saw it, Warren stumbling from the side of the barn, holding his shoulder. Blood. They came, he said, falling to one knee. 2 vans, full team. Tyler said he's leveraged now. My world stopped. Everything around me faded. They had taken my son. My son. Chris and Eli emerged from the house. They were bruised, bloodied, but alive. We couldn't stop them, Chris said, breath ragged. They used flashbangs, gas. Eli barely got us out. How long ago? I asked. 20 minutes, Eli croaked. They won't take him far, I said, clenching my jaw. They want me to chase. I looked at the blood trail Warren had left behind. My mind started calculating, analyzing terrain, escape routes, tactical response time. They messed up, I said coldly. They should have killed me because now I wasn't just fighting to defend my land. I was fighting to rescue my son and bring every last one of them down with fire and fury. I stood on my porch, looked out across the dark fields, and gave a signal I hadn't used in years. 2 long blasts from an air horn, a signal only my team would recognize. It meant one thing. We're going to war. Viewers, now I ask you, what would you do if your child was taken by a fake HOA with government tech and no fear of the law? Tell me where you're watching from, because the rescue mission begins now. The air was sharp that night, quiet but not peaceful. It was the kind of silence you feel before a storm when even the animals know something terrible is coming. Tyler was gone, and I had 20 minutes on my side. That was just enough time for me and my men to suit up. I stood in the war room I'd built in my barn, a converted tack room with blueprints, radios, and infrared surveillance maps. I pulled down the latest satellite overlay Ellie had emailed from Houston. It showed a small compound 15 miles out surrounded by abandoned oil rigs. Ridgecore has a drop site there, I told the team. It's remote, unregistered, and the perfect place to hold someone you don't want found. Chris loaded his rifle. What's the play? We go in silent, non-lethal if possible, I said, strapping on a tactical vest. But if they aim to hurt Tyler, all bets are off. Toby, despite his bruised ribs, cracked his knuckles. Let's bring the boy home. We rolled out in 3 trucks, splitting up around the back roads to avoid being tracked. We communicated with shortwave radios on encrypted frequencies, just like old times. Each vehicle carried gear we hadn't touched in years. EMP jammers, zip ties, stun rounds, thermal goggles. As we neared the compound, I killed the engine and stepped out. The sky was moonless, perfect for an approach. Through the scope, I counted 8 guards, 2 patrols, 1 on the roof. The rest were inside, and then I saw him, Tyler. He was tied to a chair in a shipping container, lit by a single overhead bulb. I didn't wait. Go, I whispered into the mic. Eli and Chris took the roof and perimeter. Warren, limping but stubborn, took the east wall. I crept through the shadows, my body remembering every step like muscle memory from the field. One of the guards near the container door took a step to light a cigarette. Bad move. I lunged from behind and dropped him with a chokehold. Silent. Swift. I slipped inside the container. Tyler, I whispered. His head shot up, eyes wide. Dad, I moved fast, cutting the zip ties around his wrists. I got you, son. You okay? He nodded, breathing fast. They said they were going to send me away as unless you gave up the ranch. Not going to happen, I said, scooping him into my arms. Jack. Toby's voice crackled in my ear. 2 inbound from the west, heavily armed. Time's up. I handed Tyler a small walkie. You remember what we practiced? Plan C. He nodded, crawling into the hollow crate hidden behind pallets. We'd trained for scenarios like this. He knew how to stay calm, how to hide. I turned to the door just as 2 men entered with rifles. You're outnumbered, one of them said, cocky. I raised my hand slowly. Am I Flash? A blinding white light burst through the window behind them. Chris had thrown a tactical flash grenade. I moved on instinct, disarmed one, swept his leg, and shoved the other into the wall. The second tried to recover, but Warren tackled him full force, even with his injury. We zip-tied both and dragged them outside. That's when I heard the scream. Incoming vehicle. A black SUV barreled down the gravel path. Headlights off. Ridgecore's extraction team. EMP now? I yelled. Eli activated the jammer. The SUV's lights flickered and then died. The engine stuttered, choked, and shut down. It rolled into a ditch, useless. I walked up to the vehicle, weapon ready. Inside, the man in the driver's seat looked shocked, then terrified. It was Leonard Maddox, the Leonard Maddox, CEO, real estate tycoon, father of this entire fake HOA scheme. He was wearing a vest, a Rolex, and a smug grin that disappeared the second I opened the car door. "Well," I said, "didn't expect to see you on the front line," he sneered. "You have no idea what you've done. I have lawyers, senators, judges. You think this little cowboy stunt changes anything?" I leaned in close. "You threatened my son. You sent mercenaries. You used government tech to spy on a family, and you left your face on the crime scene." He blinked. "I have a flash drive with every email you wrote, every payment you made, every false report you filed, and now I have you." The sheriff's cruiser pulled up not long after. Sirens off, Ramos stepped out with 3 deputies and 2 agents from the FBI's Rural Crimes Division. They didn't need convincing. We handed over Maddox and the rest of the Ridgecore team. Weapons, documents, footage, everything. I watched as Maddox was shoved into the back of the cruiser, face red with rage. "You'll regret this, Lawson," he spat. "I made people disappear for less." I smiled calmly. "You're not disappearing anyone now. You're done." Later that night, Tyler and I sat on the porch sipping hot cocoa. The stars stretched above us like a blanket, and Bandit rested his head on Tyler's lap. "Dad," Tyler said softly. "Yeah, bud." I wasn't scared. I looked over at him, proud. "You were brave, just like your mom." He smiled. We watched the sunrise break over the fields, lighting up every fence post, every blade of grass. It was over. The fake HOA was exposed. The land was safe. And Tyler, he was home. Viewers, thank you for sticking with me through this nightmare. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And remember, never back down when your family's on the line, because sometimes the quiet rancher is the last man you should ever cross. 2 months after the night we rescued Tyler, peace returned to the ranch. But it didn't come easy. The headlines read like something from a movie. Billionaire developer arrested in kidnapping plot. Fake HOA scandal exposed. Veteran rancher stops private army from seizing land. Practice CEO faces federal charges. FBI confirms tech misuse and targeted harassment. And suddenly the name Jack Lawson wasn't just known in northern Texas. It was everywhere. Reporters flooded our quiet town, standing on county roads with cameras and microphones, trying to get a glimpse of the military dad who stopped a land war. The sheriff had to rope off my property just to give us space. But honestly, I didn't care about the cameras or the interviews or the attention. All I cared about was that Tyler was safe and that it was finally over. But was it? The trial began quickly. With the evidence Ellie uncovered and the testimony from the Ridgecore enforcers we captured, the federal government moved fast. Maddox was denied bail. Charges included conspiracy, attempted kidnapping, illegal surveillance, and unauthorized use of government satellite systems. The man who tried to steal our land and our lives now sat behind steel bars. During the hearing, I stood on the witness platform holding the flash drive that brought it all down. I looked straight at Maddox. "You picked the wrong family," I told him. "You thought we were small, weak, alone, but we are none of those things. We're honest, we're strong, and now we're free." He looked down. For once, he had nothing to say. After the conviction, the court awarded us damages, millions. Tyler would have college paid for 10 times over. The land could never be contested again. It was marked as a historical family property, immune to commercial seizure. But something deeper happened that was even more important. The county board passed a new regulation, the Lawson Protection Act. It outlawed unregistered HOAs, imposed strict background checks on any land development group, and set up a ranch owner defense fund backed by the state. Because of our case, every rural family in the area now had legal resources and protection. But even more than that, people started speaking up. Farmers, homesteaders, elderly couples who'd lived on their land for generations. All of them came forward to tell their stories of threats, bribes, and harassment by phony officials. It turned out Praxis wasn't just after us. They'd been doing this for years. We were just the ones who fought back. As for Tyler, he changed too. He walked taller, spoke clearer. That quiet fear he used to carry in his shoulders gone. We rebuilt the barn together. Every fence post, every railing, every stall. We even painted a new sign at the entrance of the ranch. Lawson Ranch protected by family fire. One morning as we were rounding up the horses, he said, "Dad, do you think those bad people will ever come back?" I looked out over our land, 67 acres of pure Texas soil, and said, "If they ever do, they'll see the sign." He smiled and went back to feeding Jellybean. Then came something I didn't expect. An envelope. No return address. Inside a note. "You did the right thing. Keep protecting the land. We're watching." No threats, no names, just that. It rattled me. Not in a fearful way, but like someone out there had been paying attention. Like maybe there were more battles happening across the country, and maybe we'd inspired something bigger. I burned the letter in the fire pit that night and said nothing to Tyler. He'd had enough of that world. But me, I stayed sharp, kept my drills, kept my training. Because even when peace comes, you never forget what it costs. And if war ever comes knocking again, I'll be ready. So to everyone watching this, let me say this. The quiet families, the hardworking ranchers, the single parents doing everything to hold the line. You are not alone. Don't let fear chase you from your land. Don't let greed bully you into silence, and stand firm. Stand proud. And when the fake ones come knocking, Joey or not, look them in the eye and say, "You messed with the wrong ranch." Thank you for listening to our story. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments. And if you've ever been pushed around by someone with fake power, remember what we proved out here in Texas. One family, one child, one ranch can change everything.